Good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning, depending upon you listen to this, to the Curmudgeon in the Cellar, number 113. Now, I won't be doing one next week because I'll be at Total Con, number, good Lord, 34, 35, I don't know, it's a high number. Been doing them a long time. Now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little shilling for a friend. Now, I don't do this because I got it for free, because I didn't. I paid for it. But my friend, Lloyd Metcalf at Fail Squad Games, is making these really incredible dice boxes. Well, he calls them dice boxes, but I see more uses. They're made out of a single piece of a log, a branch, if you will, depending upon the size. But if you'll notice, the bark matches up all the way around. They have a little dowel pin. Lid slides off. Lid slids. The lid slides off, and they are beautifully marked. Then they're all lacquered and everything. Very, very nice. All out of the same piece of wood. I think these, in fact, this size or even bigger would make a wonderful jewelry box. If you had a daughter or a niece or someone who's graduating this spring, think about that. I'm going to have Lloyd make me one a little bigger that I'm going to give to my granddaughter. She doesn't watch these, so there's no danger. But anyway, Lloyd, Fail Squad Games, Lloyd Metcalf, he's got them posted on his website. Fail Squad, Fail, F-A-I-L, Squad, S-Q-U-A-D, all one word, .com. Okay. Not a lot of things to talk about tonight. Weren't a lot of comments. And some of them are about the same thing. It seems as though the solo topic that we discussed last week did hit some targets. Solo D&D is an empty exercise in self-abuse. Singing every die roll is sacred. I think that must be a convoluted quote of my own. Next, same topic. I once tried the random dungeon generator. Whether to create a dungeon for the players or to play solo, I can't remember, but I gave up on it fairly quickly. A lot of people say that. Okay, here's one, though, that really strikes a different note and has a lot of legitimacy to it. Psionics, a solo D&D story you might want to share. In the 1980s, if you were a lone 12 or 13 or 14-year-old awkward, nerdy kid in a single-parent, low-income home with a lot of time on his hands, and the only time you could play D&D with peers was three hours every 2 or 3 weeks after Sunday church or religious service, you played solo D&D with graph paper and let the theater of your own mind do its own thing like it was a sacred oracle to escape the hell world of cruel hazing of public schools. The best fantasy role-playing video games at the time was Ultima 4 and old Apple IIs that got boring real quick. The random wilderness terrain generators seemed boring at first until I learned I could just meander with my own crude magic markers drawing outdoor maps. So, absolutely, I can certainly see where that could be very therapeutic. And the key phrase here is theater of the mind. And obviously it helped you get through what sounds to be a rather unpleasant childhood. And for that, I'm grateful. And tonight on Jeopardy, they had a category about X in the middle, or X marks the spot. Anyway, all the answers had an X in them. And so one of the questions was something about Dungeons and Dragons characteristic that had to do with your skill with your hand, and anyway, it was dexterity. And my wife just looked at me and rolled her eyes. I go, yes. We are everywhere. Okay. Okay. This gentleman informed me that David Hargrave passed away in '88 at the ridiculously young age of 42. I would agree. That's yeah, I guess, let's see, if he was 42 in 88, that means he was born in 46. Oh, that would have made him 3 years older than me. Oh, I ran into contact with the Arduin Grimoire when in undergrad, and it seemed to me to be David's homebrew campaign in booklet form. Lots of ideas, good, bad, and indifferent. I think that's a pretty fair assessment. David had some good ideas, and his whole problem was that he tried to latch on to our wagon without asking permission, even or anything else. And yeah, everybody's homebrew campaign had good ideas, bad ideas, and meh, not so great ideas. Okay. Running a campaign, do you clear the dungeon after the boss monster is slain, or B, make players survive the journey out after the boss is slain? Well, it's not like the boss dies and all the puppets fade. Given, depending upon the circumstances, obviously, but having made it down into the bowels and successfully completed what you were doing, if you had a long distance go back to safety, well, of course there'd be chances. Now, I'd be, terribly reluctant to make them heavy chances. It would just be, what had you pissed off in the levels above you that might have gotten loose by now and was hunting you. And that could make for some really interesting fun. As a matter of fact, in Greyhawk, in Gary's campaign, he would routinely clean out levels and then repopulate the same levels. So the players knew where they were going, 2 turns left, 1 turn right. They knew that because it was the same place, but they would often have different stuff in it. And I thought it was genius on Gary's part because he had these amazingly detailed dungeons. I wouldn't want to just throw it away and draw a new one either. So he repopulated them. And they were called such things as the Orc Wing or the Goblin Wing and stuff like that, which was just smart, I think, on his part, because you put a lot of effort into a really intense area of your dungeon, and you manage to meet whatever the achievements are. Well, then, I'm not going to waste it. I may, have a collapse here and mine something out there, but for the most part. Okay. All right. This is very interesting. Tim. Steve Marsh has stated that he made a fan submission of a new character class to TSR that influenced in some way the introduction of psionic ability into Eldritch Wizardry. Do you recall any details about the class and what the discussion was at TSR about the time, about what would be used and what would not be? Well, I'd never argue with Steve. I consider him a friend, and he's an extremely upright and honorable and honest man. And if he said he sent in a fan submission, he may very well have. I do know that when he was doing missionary work or whatever it was for a time before I got there, he was sending Gary stuff. Now, as was the case in Blackmore, I got handed a wad of papers, some with names on them, some without, and said, here, make the next supplement. There may have been something in there from Steve. It may have had a title page, cover page. It may not have. I really couldn't tell you. I do know that prior to being given the assignment to do Eldritch Wizardry, Gary and I talked about, I had brought up the fact that it was not fair if the player characters didn't have a chance to fight back against brain moles and mind flayers and stuff. And I was, like Blackmore, I was handed a wad of stuff and said, here, these are some thoughts on this and some things on this, and do what you and I have been talking about and work something out and let me know how it comes out. And so the Psionics was one of the few times that I went to Gary once or twice in the creation of it, just to make sure I was staying on track and wasn't getting, way out weirded. because, it was a whole different thing back then. Expand your mind and be psionic. So, yeah, Steve may have sent some stuff in. I may have inadvertently picked up some of Steve's suggestions or picked up some of his and modified them. It's entirely possible. And if Steve said he sent something in, then I'm sure he did. Whether or not I ever saw it, I couldn't say. I really couldn't. And it's certainly possible because I know he sent Gary a lot of good ideas. It's certainly possible that some of his stuff was in the WADA stuff I was given. Sometimes on top of the WADA stuff I was given was what they wanted to be in each supplement. We need this, 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 and this. And so I scrambled to hit those targets. So it's highly possible. And Steve said he sent it in. I'm sure he did. I cannot honestly say one way or another whether I saw it, if I did see it, whether I knew it was somebody else's and not something that Gary had scribbled out or Brian had scribbled out, because, that's where I got a lot of the stuff at the time. It's highly possible. Highly possible. I know I put Steve Sahagan straight into Blackmore, and Arneson had a fit when I thought it was a perfect fit for his Temple of the Frog and this amphibious race. But Dave had a conniption. Now here's a comment I truly enjoyed for its hubris and temerity. It is not a difference in opinion. You are wrong on skills. Mediocre people are no good with them. Intelligent people can do more than a mediocre person can with them. Mediocre people's take on these things leads intelligent people down the wrong path. Well, if I was going to get into psychoanalytical on this, I would have a really good time. It's always a difference of opinion on my videos, unless it's excuse me, dry throat, worse, dry tongue. Unless it's a specific question on rules as written, everything I say is my opinion, what I think about it. Therefore, I can't be wrong. You can think my opinion on it is wrong. If I were to analyze this, I would think that this person probably considers themselves in the intelligent part of that equation, and probably at some point in the past had a bad result as a result of some mediocre person's misuse of skills. Duh. If you want to get into parsing intelligence, of course, intelligent people can do more. No, I'm not even going to go in there. No, not going there. I'm not wrong. You might not like my opinion. My opinion is that I don't need them and they're useless, and that they stifle creativity and they stifle thinking. But that's my opinion, and therefore it can't be wrong. You can just disagree with it, person who I choose not to name and open to ridicule. Next, what's your favorite time period or recommended time period for tabletop role playing? Well, obviously, I'm deeply rooted in high fantasy. I also really enjoy the post-apocalyptic stuff. I know that I would have a great time in I played in one at GaryCon where I ended up as a spider with 38 eyes on my back. I really enjoy the even wilder, weirder, more nothing is disbelievable, which used to be the war cry in old school D&D. I disbelieve, because that way it would make an illusion go away. Well, nothing's disbelievable in something like Mutant Crop Classics. Nothing. So I guess those would be my two favorites. Though there was a time when I really enjoyed Wild West role playing, Boot Hill specifically, and we threw in Gunfighter for the actual shootouts. I enjoyed that quite a lot. You had lots of good old 50s and 60s westerns to draw on, which is an important thing in a topic that's coming up, having something to draw on. How about a game where you do this same question, or how about a game where you steal TVs from luxury apartments? Well, there's probably some crime games out there. The gangster games wouldn't work because they didn't have Gangbusters. That Gangbusters. I don't think I'd like stealing luxury TVs out of luxury apartments because they probably got wired for, alarms and stuff. But I can remember, I don't know if I've ever told this story, but when we play tested the hell out of Gangbusters over several years before it was finally released, because we just called it the gangster game at the time when it was, in work. And when Brian started it, he gave us all an area of the city of Chicago, basically, and said, set us up in a little rackets type thing, and then let us loose. And Brian made a mistake. Anything we could find in history, from the old newspapers and stuff, we could use. Well, I'll tell you what, some of those guys were amazingly ingenious. We found out, for instance, that 2 old Chicago phone books, when used to line the insides of panel and delivery trucks, would stop anything short of a .50 caliber at very close range, and a .50 caliber at long range wouldn't penetrate. So we were running down to the dump, and Brian didn't know what was going on, and so we 2 of us said we were going down the dump. Well, what are you going to do? Well, we're going to look for old film books. Oh, well, Brian says, sure, I'm sure there's gazillions of them. Fine, thanks. And we each went down and filled up a dump truck with old film books, went back and lined all our trucks, our delivery trucks, our panel trucks, and what have you. I was somebody big pierogi. I was a Polish gangster, and my cover was a series of pierogi shops. So the trucks were seen all around town, and we were bootleggers, of course. And we had a couple of, we had lots of Tommies, Thompson submachine guns, and we broke into an armory and got a couple 30 calibers. And poor Brian, this might be the only time I say poor Brian, he had unleashed Gary and I and Rob Coons and Sutherland and virtually everybody was there at the time, just unleashed us. And this is before the internet, but we were still going down to the library and looking at old microfiche, tapes or microfiche slides of old Chicago newspapers and stuff, and checking out all the books on the mob. And part of the reason I'm sure it took so long to develop, because we had to figure out what would work and what wouldn't, and come on, let's be sensible, guys. But anyway, I got off topic there. But that was a great time, and I still think you could have a fun time making a game in that period. But you can probably make a great engine, but the whole ethic of the game, if you were just bootlegging, that's one thing. But if we were getting into other things, and Brian was uncomfortable with it going there, into gambling and drugs, and and you give a bunch of creative types free reign like that, and that's what happens. Any idea why I find that 5th edition tends to have Scooby-Doo type mysteries as adventures instead of dungeon crawls? Has the game evolved that much? Well, that question might have been better asked, has the game devolved that much? There's a principle in marketing and advertising that know your market and know what background they have to know whether or not your product's going to appeal to them. This also ties into another question that's coming up next. If you're aiming at a significant demographic that grew up absorbing and eating up Scooby-Doo, and that's what they find fun, mysteries rather than dungeon crawls, then you make adventures that are going to sell. Plain and simple. If mysteries, I do mysteries. There's always some mystery going on in every one I write. It's not the whole thing, but there's some underlying mystery or some side mystery thing, because I think it adds a nice, it's a nice addition to the narrative. But, marketing and advertising, people will tell you, know your market, poll your market, sample your market, and then sell your market what they say they're going to buy, whether overtly or through their answers, and sell them what they want. And if that's what 5e wants, sell it. I don't care. It's still D&D. See, that doesn't bother me, all the additions in that. I know where I was at the very beginning. And so I just see this as my 5th generation, great grandchild. I love the idea that there's no box, as you put it. However, my girlfriend has trouble thinking outside the box. When playing D&D, she'll ask what she should do instead of just blurting out an action, any action. She's new to the game, so I hope one day she'll get that she can do anything. She doesn't need to ask what to do, but just do. Any advice to help her along? Yeah, this is reference to something I said earlier about having something to draw upon. With the cowboy games, with Boot Hill and that, and Cattle Punk from Kinzer, the having that background is great. I suggest for the girlfriend that you find a few Harold Shea stories. Harold Shea stories were primarily written by L. Sprague de Camp and Fletcher Pratt. In my opinion, two of the good old fantasy writers. What was then called Swords and Sorcery, or Sword and Sandal even, but Sword and Sorcery mostly. And Harold Shea was a fish out of water. Now, why is this a good idea to read? Well, Harold Shea finds himself in a totally different milieu and totally different surroundings, and he thinks them through, and he comes up with solutions. Perhaps reading a couple of these will be a roadmap to finding yourself in the same circumstances, learning to observe, and making logical conclusions and decisions and suggestions. I think it might help. It certainly won't hurt. Harold Shea is a great, in my opinion, and that's why there's stuff by those guys in Appendix N. I think that the Harold Shea stories were a great background to have for being a fish out of water, trying out this new fantasy stuff. Harold Shea's an everyday, normal, contemporary guy, and all of a sudden he's back, and it's not Manhattan anymore. That might be a very easy way to get her to realize, yeah, I can try anything. It's not gonna, I suspect that some of it might be fear of embarrassment, especially if she's only one of a couple of ladies playing a group that are primarily guys, not wanting to be laughed at or anything. And just let her know that we've all been laughed at one time or another for thinking outside the box, and seemed like a good idea right up to the time we uttered it. And then you hear those words coming out of your mouth. You go, blah, 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 blah. So, have her watch this. Just part of it right here, around the 25-minute mark or thereabouts. Okay, this is the last one last one I got to deal with tonight. Like I said, short night. Love your videos. Hear you talk about gaming. Here's a quick one for you. When you run different RPGs, do you adjust your personal style as a game master to fit the system? Or do you bend the system to your will and make it your style? I personally find myself running different games in much the same manner. Well, of course I do. My first and foremost credo is suggestions, not rules. So, of course, I'm going to bend whatever I don't like. I think my strong suit is storytelling, both when I'm writing and when I'm running a game, and therefore I'm gonna be the same, same voice, same pacing, same, I seldom slip into dialect or, I mentioned one time God knows why I slipped into what was a passable imitation of parcel tongue. But that was just a whim, and it's not something I do often. If I was running a Dungeon Crawl Classics, I'd probably run it the same as a Mutant Crawl Classic or a D&D game in my style, good, bad, or indifferent, however you view it. I really can't see a reason to change. Hope that doesn't sound real stuck up, but I don't know why you would change. Now, if I were running a game for a bunch of young kids, well, yeah, I'm sure I do voices and stuff, just like I do when I'm reading to my great grandchildren. I do voices in that for the characters in the book, but I might do that if I was doing it for a bunch of kids. And that's the last comment I got to respond to. I won't be doing one, as I said earlier, next week, because I'll be in Massachusetts at Total Confusion Con. And I will do one the week following and give you a full report on TotalCon. Always one of my absolute favorite places to go to every year. I have a great time. They treat me real nice, and I get to see a lot of friends that I only see once or twice a year. So looking forward to it. I hope to see a bunch of you there. And if you're there, just look me up. I'm usually able to, if you can't find me running a game, then you might find me up in the room where the food is, because they have a lot of nice home cooked food, most of which I can't eat because of dietary restrictions, but what I can is always good. Or, find me during when one of my games is either just beginning or think you're ending, and catch me there. And if it's just beginning, I'll tell you when you might catch me, whatever. I'm not hard to find. Other than that, I don't have much to Dodata Govi. Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, a curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when them rates went down. Called it Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's a curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought Psionics to the game to attack that wizard grave. PSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree,
High as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.